And now let's try and tune in to no good music from an undisclosed location somewhere in New Jersey. That style, playing guitar.
When that comes on, you're out on the dance floor.
Sammy still rocks, man.
Am I going to listen to this again?
And that's definitely going to be a theme.
You can't make this shit up.
No.
Hey everybody, this is Rob.
And Jeremy.
And we are back with part 2 of the Universal Monster Films, Show 51. And we are starting this one with albums turning, I think I only have 50 years and 40. I don't think I have 30s on this. So we're talking November 1973. And I have some news from 73. November 1st, Kiss becomes the first act signed by Neil Bogart's new label, Casablanca. On November 1st. November 5th, this is a weird one, and I've heard this story before, but 2 friends of the recently deceased Graham Parsons hand themselves into police and confess to having carried out an impromptu cremation of the singer's body at the Joshua Tree National Monument.
What?
Yes.
Oh.
So it looks like they stole his body. We're going to cremate it. November 20th, The Who opened their Quadrophenia U.S. tour with a concert at San Francisco's Cow Palace. But drummer Keith Moon passes out and has to be carried off stage.
Yep.
19-year-old fan Scott Halpin is selected from the audience to finish the show. Now we have albums from November 73, November 5th. We got Bruce Springsteen, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. Now this is the second studio album by Bruce, and it was recorded by Springsteen with the E Street Band at 914 Sound Studios in New York, Blauvelt. I've never heard of that town. And it includes the song Rosalita, Come Out Tonight. And it's the band's most used set closing song, says through 1985. Now, as with Springsteen's first album, released earlier in the year, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle was well received critically, but had little commercial success at the time. Locally, though, the album sold well and was played regularly on Northeast AOR stations and did make Springsteen a local phenomenon. Now, once Springsteen achieved nationwide popularity with Born to Run, several selections from this album became popular FM radio airplay and concert favorites. On November 7th, 2009, Springsteen and the E Street Band played the album in its entirety for the first time during a concert at Madison Square Garden. And in 2020, it was an updated version of Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time. And the album was ranked at 345. So November 9th, Billy Joel, Piano Man, is turning 50.
That's a song, if I never heard it again, I wouldn't be upset about it.
And believe it or not, this is also the second studio album by Billy Joel. And I think they were on the same label, if I recall. The album emerged from legal difficulties with Joel's former label, Family Productions, and ultimately became his first breakthrough album. And the title track is a fictionalized retelling of Joel's experiences with people he met at a lounge as a lounge singer in Los Angeles. The song peaked at number 25 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 4 on the Adult Contemporary Singles chart. Travelin' Prayer and Worst Comes to Worst peaked at number 77 and 80 on the Hot 100. And the album was certified gold by the RIAA in 1975. But Joel received only $8,000 in royalties.
Wow.
From the album. November 26th, we got Badfinger. Their album called Ass. This is the 5th studio album by the British rock band Badfinger, and it was their last album released on Apple Records. The opening track, Apple of My Eye, refers to the band leaving the label to begin its new contract with Warner Brothers Records. And the cover artwork shows a donkey chasing a distant carrot, alludes to Badfinger's feelings that they had being misled by Apple. And the cover was painted by Grammy Award-winning artist Peter Corriston, who would later create album covers for Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti, and the Rolling Stones, Some Girls, and Tattoo You. Now we go to 1983, November 12th, some news. Duran Duran start their Sing Blue Silver World Tour, and the tour begins with sold-out shows in Australia. Hear that, Ken? Ken Cook? November 26th, Quiet Riot's Metal Health album tops the U.S. album charts. I love that album.
Love that album.
And it's the first heavy metal album to hit number 1 in America. So then we have some albums. November 7th, the Rolling Stones Undercover. This was their 17th British and 19th American studio album. The band would move the label to Columbia Records for its follow-up, which was 86's Dirty Work. After the band's preceding studio album Tattoo You from 1981, it was mostly patched together from a selection of outtakes, but Undercover was their first release of all new recordings in the 80s. Tensions in the studio were high as each of the principal songwriters wanted to take the band in different directions. Vocalist Mick Jagger sought to adapt to modern trends in music, favoring reggae, world beat, and new wave musical textures, while guitarist Keith Richards wanted the band to return to their blues rock roots. As a result, the album is a eclectic collection of songs covering a wide range of styles. So it would be the first Rolling Stones album in more than a decade to miss reaching number 1 on the U.S. albums chart, and it peaked at number 4. And 3 singles were released from the album, with the highest charting being the top 40 release Undercover of the Night. Yeah, it's not one of my favorite albums. November 10th, we got Billy Idol, Rebel Yell. And this was his second album. After the release of his 1982 eponymous debut studio album, Idol continued his collaboration with producer Keith Forsey and multi-instrumentalist Steve Stevens.
And they produced more.
The album was recorded at Electric Lady Studios in New York, initially recording without a drummer, utilizing only electric drum machines. And then Forsey and Stevens later decided to hire Tommy Price to play drums on some of the songs.
Okay.
Now, Billy Idol got the idea to name the album Rebel Yell after attending a party with the Rolling Stones. He explained on VH1 Storytellers that people were drinking Rebel Yell bourbon whiskey, and he thought that would be a great title for an album.
He was right.
Now, Billy Idol was battling Chrysalis Records over creative control and decided to steal the master tapes. He eventually returned to the studio victorious, but Forsey then informed him that he had taken the wrong tapes. So all of the singles, particularly Rebel Yell, Eyes Without a Face, and Flesh for Fantasy, would eventually have successful music videos on MTV. And Billy Idol's longtime girlfriend, Perry Lister, can be seen in the front row during the video for Rebel Yell. Little trivia there. November 21st, we have U2, Under a Blood Red Sky. Now, I had this album.
Great album.
The record's 8 tracks were compiled from 3 concerts during the group's 1983 War Tour, including 2 songs from their June 5th performance at Red Rocks Amphitheater. The concert film U2 Live at Red Rocks, Under Blood Red Sky, was recorded at the same Red Rock shows and was released as a companion to the live album. Both releases helped establish U2's reputation globally as a renowned live act. The title is taken from the lyrics of the song New Year's Day, which was on the War album. Now, we do have honorable mentions. Duran Duran, 7 and the Ragged Tiger. released November 21st, 83. And this one you may not know, Jeremy, but
Okay. I'm ready.
you know who Tracy Ullman is?
Yes.
Okay. So she put out an album. It was her debut album. You Broke My Heart in 17 Places, November 25th. I have this album, and I remember when this one song came out. I love this song, and it's called They Don't Know. And you have to see the video if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
Because at the end, I think the song's about a woman she has a lot of kids. They show her in the kitchen, I think doing dishes, and she's like a housewife. And she has a love for someone that probably isn't possible. I don't know.
Okay. I've never seen the movie or the video, but
at the end of the video, she's in a car with Paul McCartney.
oh, cool.
And it looks like, I don't know if they just got married. So it's pretty funny. And the song was written by Christy McCall. She was from the Pogues. Did I do news for 83?
I don't think so.
Oh,
You've done albums turning 50.
Okay. I'm going backwards here, but we have some news. November 18th. And this is, I think Jeremy mentioned this album as being one of his favorites. Nirvana Unplugged.
Yep.
So on November 18th, that's when they did that concert. 80. Oh, this is 93. I'm sorry. We're in the third.
That explains now.
Okay.
Yeah, because you did do some news, because you talked about Keith Moon passing out on the stage.
Okay. So we are doing albums turning 30.
Okay.
Okay. So here's some news. November 18th, one of Jeremy's favorite albums, Nirvana Unplugged.
Yep.
That's when they played that concert for MTV. November 19th, Pearl Jam singer Eddie Vedder is arrested in New Orleans on charges of public drunkenness after a barroom brawl.
Oh, wow.
Now, I only have one album for 93.
Yeah, I thought so.
And in 93, I think I might have just been getting into Frank Sinatra. But I was excited because Frank was up there in age.
Mm-hmm.
He might have been like close to 90. But he did an album called Duets. Now, the album consists of mostly electronically assembled duets between Sinatra and younger singers from various genres. He was never in the studio with them. Now, this debuted at number 2 on Billboard Albums chart, and it sold over 3 million copies in the U.S.
Awesome.
And it's the only Sinatra album to date to achieve triple platinum certification.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the album received mixed reviews from critics, with complaints stemming from Sinatra's specified style of isolated performance, like we said, where he was never in the studio with the performer. And the guest singers had been directed to sing along to his pre-recorded vocal parts and make their performance complement his. So I bought this CD. I still have the CD that I bought. Might have been the first CD that had a slip case, which I thought was cool. It's actually a kind of has a texture to it on the outside, and you take the CD out. But it's pretty substantial. But Bono is on this, which is an odd song. I've Got You Under My Skin. And there's even a video. Of course, the video is Frank and Bono together, finally. They're at the end of the video. Well, it starts out where Frank is singing with Bono, and Bono's on a monitor. And then Bono's singing to Frank, vice versa. But by the end of the video, they're in a limo driving around.
Okay.
But that was an album I still listen to.
I always laugh at critics because, you said there that they criticized the fact that he didn't get into the studio to work with some of the people doing the duets on the album with him. If he's pushing 90 years old, maybe he couldn't get into the studio. Like, maybe he physically didn't have the strength to be able to go in every day and do what was required.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It would have been too hard to schedule. Maybe he went in when he could.
Exactly.
And then to try and get the other person to line up with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, I hear stuff like that and I just laugh because it's like, at some point, you got to use a little bit of common sense.
Yeah.
If he was like in his 50s or 60s, okay, yeah, maybe why couldn't he work around the schedule? But
yeah,
pushing 90, goodness gracious, man.
And there was a second one, but I want to say it was country because I know Willie Nelson, I think, was on that one.
Oh, okay.
I don't know when that came out.
I actually like Frank Sinatra, but I didn't know about the duets. albums.
So now we have a top 10 list, and this is top 10 monster songs. See if we know any of these. So number 10, we have Eye of the Zombie by John Fogerty from 1986. I'm not familiar with this one.
I'd have to hear it. By title, I don't recognize it.
Now, I got this list from UltimateClassicRock.com from May 2013 by Eduardo Rivadavia. So he says, we begin our stroll through the top 10 monster songs with this rather less than terrifying entry. So I guess it's probably references zombies, of course, Eye of the Zombie. He doesn't have much on this song. Number 9 is a band we just talked about on the last podcast, is Kiss, Almost Human, from Love Gun, 1977. He says, we're not entirely sure what sort of monster is being talked about here, but we'll accept Almost Human purely on faith, because for one thing, the legendary rocker singing it did so while disguised behind his famous demon makeup. We're pretty sure old Gene Simmons ain't technically human either. There we go. I know that song, Almost Human. That is a strange song. Number 8, Feed My Frankenstein by Alice Cooper from 1992's Hey Stupid.
We've both seen that live together.
We got number 7, King Kong. I don't know this song, from The Mothers of Invention, which is, of course, Frank Zappa. Well, it just says The Mothers of Invention. Uncle Meat from 1969. So I don't know if this might just be the band, though. Let's see. It says Zappa's allegorical testimonial to that big, scary ape King Kong gains him entry to our list, on the strength of the 6 versions covering Uncle Meat's 4th vinyl side. There's 6 versions of the song.
All right.
Nice. Number 6, The Thing That Should Not Be by Metallica, Master of Puppets, 86.
I know that song.
5, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, David Bowie. We got number 4, Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne, from his album of the same name, 83. So we got Frankenstein, number 3, Edgar Winter.
It's a good song.
From They Only Come Out at Night, 1972. We got 2, Werewolves of London. Now, this wasn't on another list we're doing, so Jeremy pointed out, but it is on this one, on Monsters. Warren Zevon, Excitable Boy, 78. And we know this one well. Local radio station play this all the time.
Yes.
I love Warren Zevon. This is one of my, I still like this song. I think it's a song like, like Christmas songs you listen to around, December. I think this is one you maybe give it a listen around, Halloween. Now, Mick Fleetwood is on drums on this one. John McVie on bass. And Jackson Browne produced this song.
Yeah. And I still haven't seen a werewolf drinking pina colada.
Yeah, at Trader Vic's.
Yeah.
Maybe at Trader Joe's. And number 1, Godzilla, Blue Oyster Cult.
Go, go, Godzilla.
From their 77 album Spectres. So we know that song. That's a great song.
That is a great song.
Might give that a listen.
And that doesn't get played as often as it really should.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. It's not long.
So that does it for our list. So that does it. Anything else before we get into the rest of the movies?
Now we're back to Universal Monsters.
Okay. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with, I'm going to say top 3, but we'll be back with the remaining 3 Universal monster movies.
An whole day's work ruined by a foolish ignorant man.
The very day we announced our engagement, he told me of his experiments. He said he was on the verge of a discovery so terrific that he doubted his own sanity. There was a strange look in his eyes.
We Egyptians are not permitted to dig up our ancient dead. Only foreign museums.
How did you know about the earrings in my room?
Oh, I'm psychic. Every time I see a beautiful girl, I know all about her. Just like that.
happened. I can't bear to look at it.
What's happened?
I can't tell you. I can't.
Oh, but you must tell me. I have a right to know.
Tell you we can learn more from it if it's alive.
Please, what is it you found?
Sounds incredible, but it appeared to be human. It's the greatest find yet. Nothing compares to it.
Okay, we are back, and we're about to talk about the last 3 Universal monster movies.
Yep. We're on your number 2. So
okay.
To recap, we covered The Mummy, The Wolfman, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
To this point.
Okay. So my number 2 is Dracula.
Okay.
Now,
so we matched there.
What number was Dracula for you?
I had him at number 5.
Okay. So I guess we could talk about Dracula.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This one really. So I'm glad you have it ranked high. It did really well on our poll, which at the end I'll go on talk about those numbers. But I was very disappointed with this movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I went into it with like really, really high expectations, I think, and I was let down.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean the movie was bad. Let me just clarify that. But I just wasn't blown away.
I think I like it because I've read the book, and I don't know, I've always liked Bela Lugosi as him portraying Dracula. It's the first, I think, vampire movie. I know Jeremy's not too fond of vampire movies.
Besides, wasn't Nosferatu before that?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Before we get into the movie itself, I have something on. Now, as collectors, I know we do collect posters, but I have a couple original but not that old posters.
Right.
I wanted to talk about the original Dracula poster.
Okay.
So the article states that the one sheet of Dracula becomes the most expensive poster ever sold. But this really isn't true. I don't know why that's the headline. Because there's a poster for Metropolis, which was, I want to say Metropolis was like early 1900s. And so this poster and this article, let's see, is from 2017. And this poster sold for $525,800.
Wow.
But I think the Metropolis was in the 600 range, and I think it still remains the most expensive poster. So I just wanted to mention that there's not much on this. And it's the poster where he's Bela Lugosi's, face, and it's kind of colorful poster.
Yep.
He's kind of giving a ominous, look. So there's not much on this, but I just wanted to mention that as far as posters. I did have something on the Mummy, but that one sold for a lot too. But you can imagine these. First of all, we just today we talked to Sara Karloff. We can say that now. We did talk about people collecting back then. We talked about them just pasting over posters, and people didn't save this stuff. It was in the theater for a while, and then they just threw these posters out. Or, do you want this?
Yep.
And maybe someone tacked it up on their wall and just got rid of it. And I think I read that there's only 2 of these posters in existence.
Wow.
So that's why it's priced so high too.
Yep.
So let's talk about the movie itself.
This was another one of those movies like The Mummy where there was silence in a lot of places. So I, had to kind of constantly wonder if it froze up or if I was waiting. And then when there was dialogue, it was, to me at least, very dry and kind of not really interesting or exciting.
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi did a great job as Dracula. I just didn't think anybody that surrounded him in the cast did anything to lift his performance up and make the movie that much better.
I think he was good at being creepy, and I don't think he had many lines in the movie.
Right.
I do like the way it was filmed, and just the creepiness of it. Also, the one scene which I probably have in my notes, is the brides in the beginning. They were kind of creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the film premiered February 12th, 1931. Got an 82% audience score. The budget was $341,000 on this one. And 75 minutes. And within 48 hours of its opening at New York's Roxy Theater, it had sold 50,000 tickets.
That's awesome.
Building a momentum that culminated in a $700,000 profit. And it's the largest of Universal's 1931 releases. So we got Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula, Helen Chandler as Mina, David Manners as John Harker, and Dwight Fry. He plays Renfield. Now, Alice Cooper wrote and recorded a song as a tribute to Dwight Fry, believe it or not. The Ballad of Dwight Fry. I don't know if you ever heard of it. But he spelled the name F-R-Y because Dwight Fry's last name was F-R-Y-E. And it was on the 1971 LP Love It to Death. And on stage, this song would be portrayed with Alice Cooper in a straitjacket trying to escape and finally breaking free at the end of the song to strangle a nurse with the ties from the straitjacket.
Then I've seen that one performed live, and I didn't realize that was the name of the song.
Yeah.
Unless he just does that performance.
I don't think he mentions the name in the song, so maybe that's why.
Okay. Because I've seen that. I don't know if it was with you, but I know when I saw them open for Motley Crue out in Michigan, he was in a straitjacket and he did the whole strangling of the nurse, and I was like, whoa, that was weird. It was really cool, cool visually, but
I think he does that each show, so I'm pretty sure we saw it.
Yeah.
And then we have Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing, a couple other people, Herbert Bunston, Frances Dade as Lucy, and let's see, Joan Standing as Nurse Briggs, and in an error on the opening credits, she's misidentified as maid instead of nurse. Bram Stoker's novel had already been filmed without permission as Nosferatu.
Isn't it Bram Stoker?
B-R-A-M, Bram. Yeah. Bram.
I don't know. I think it's Bram, but that's okay.
Tomato.
There you go.
In 1922. So that film was made without permission. And Stoker's widow sued for plagiarism and copyright infringement. And the courts decided in her favor and essentially ordering that all prints of Nosferatu be destroyed. And of course, they weren't. So we can still say it.
Yeah.
Young Hollywood producer Carl Laemmle. I want to say Laemmle because of the way it's spelled. Also saw the box office potential in Stoker's Gothic chiller, and he legally acquired the novel's film rights. Initially, he wanted Dracula to be a spectacle on a scale with the lavish silent films The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and The Phantom of the Opera. Now, Universal Pictures paid $40,000 for all rights to the novel and stage plays, so they would have exclusive rights to the Dracula character. Universal also brought Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Louis Bromfield to pen the script to fit the grand scale vision. Bromfield tried to bring together the novel and the stage play, and in his draft suggested that Dracula should be two people: ghoulish old man at the beginning of the film, who by traveling to London and feeding on blood gets rejuvenated into drawing room Dracula of the theater. Now, Jonathan Harker was supposed to travel to Transylvania in the opening scenes of the film. Because if you remember the film with, is it Keanu Reeves? Who's in the...
Tom Cruise? Interview with the Vampire?
No, the film Dracula with Gary Oldman.
I have no idea.
You've never seen that film?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
The film, I think it's from the 90s, Dracula. We have John Harker, the character John Harker, and that's the character in the novel.
It is Keanu Reeves, by the way.
But in this one, we have Renfield. Now, Renfield is in the newer Dracula. I say newer. It's pretty old now. But in this one, Renfield is the one who goes, to the castle. And as in the stage play, Dracula was supposed to kiss Mina passionately on the lips, but those things never made it into the movie, either because they were considered too expensive. How's a kiss expensive? I don't know. Or replaced by rewritten scenes, or were deemed too risky. So that would be too risky.
Right.
So Bromfield was soon replaced with Garrett Fort. Fort turned to the stage play, and it was already a huge hit on Broadway, and it became a blueprint as the production gained momentum. So the film was originally intended for Conrad Veidt, V-E-I-D-T, who had just appeared in Universal's The Man Who Laughs and The Last Performance. So when Veidt returned to Germany, fearing his English was not good enough for talkies, Universal looked to Lon Chaney, star of The Hunchback, Phantom of the Opera. And I think that was Lon Chaney's father.
Interesting.
Although at the time Chaney was under contract to Metro Goldwyn Mayer, he had already decided a remake of The Unholy Three, which would be his first sound film. And then after his sudden death, casting the title role proved problematic. So initially, Lamy was not at all interested in Lugosi, in spite of good reviews for his stage portrayal. And Lamy instead considered more established screen actors, with John Ray in All Quiet on the Western Front being announced as cast in the role. So Lugosi lobbied hard and ultimately won the executives over, thanks in part to him accepting a paltry $500 per week salary for 7 weeks of work.
Wow.
So he got paid $3,500. Lou Ayres was hired to play Jonathan Harker, only to be replaced with Robert Ames because of filming conflict. And then Ames was replaced. So we got a lot of people, because he had a messy divorce that hit the headlines. Even back then, if you were in the tabloids, they didn't want you. So September 29th, 1930, Dracula began shooting at Universal City, and it had a 36-day schedule. Todd Browning shot scenes of Dracula's castle and Borgo Pass all the first week of production. And according to numerous accounts, the production is alleged to have been a mostly disorganized affair, with the usually meticulous Todd Browning leaving cinematographer Carl Frund to take over during much of the shoot, making Frund something of an uncredited director of the film. And we've heard of this before with The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Right.
With Tim Burton. So Edward Van Sloan, he played Van Helsing on Broadway, opposite Lugosi. So I guess Lugosi did play Dracula on Broadway, and he reprised his role on screen. But the actor wondered why the film version reduced the large mirror used in the play to a small cigarette box with a mirrored lid. He didn't think much about the film. In a letter to his nephew, he once wrote, "That reminds me of your failure to see the Dracula film on TV. How lucky you were. What must it be like today? Overplayed, overwritten, altogether lousy." This is the guy that was in the film. So Todd Browning, he remembered actress Helen Chandler from the 1928 Broadway play The Silent House, and based on that performance, chose her for Mina, and she becomes the mistress to Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula. Now, her salary was $750 per week, making her the highest paid member of the cast. And at the time of filming, she already battled severe alcoholism, and she was known to laugh at Lugosi's mirror ritual when they were shooting. Or Lugosi had this, he would look in the mirror and say, "I am Dracula." And she would laugh at him. So I'm sure he didn't like that. And before the film was even released, Lugosi worried that it would cause him to be typecast, which we talked about with Sara Karloff. He reportedly rejected an offer to reprise his role as Dracula in another stage tour of the play, stating, "No, not at any price. When I'm through with this picture, I hope to never hear of Dracula again. I cannot stand it. I do not intend that it shall possess me." Interestingly enough, when Lugosi passed away in 1956, I don't know if you know this, Jeremy, He was buried wearing one of the Dracula capes.
I did know that, actually.
And his full costume, as well as his Dracula ring. And contrary to popular belief, Lugosi never requested to be buried in his cloak.
Right.
So Bela G. Lugosi, which is his son, confirmed on numerous occasions that he and his mother, Lillian, made the decision, but believed that is what his father would have wanted. So the music from this film, now owing to the cost of adding an original musical score to a film soundtrack, no score has ever been composed specifically for the film. The music heard during the opening credits is an excerpt from Act 2 of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake and was reused in 1932 for The Mummy, which we talked about.
Yep.
During this theater scene where Dracula meets Dr. Seward, Harker, Mina, and Lucy, the end of the overture to Wagner's Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg can also be heard, as well as the dark opening of Schubert's Unfinished Symphony in B minor. So there's your music. And now we're going to talk about the movie itself. Okay, so we're going to talk about the movie. We first see a carriage riding through some rough terrain, and the carriage stops at a small village. When one of the passengers gets off the carriage, he tells the driver to leave his luggage on the carriage since he's going to Borgo Pass to meet Count Dracula. His name is Renfield. So the innkeeper tells him that he mustn't go there. He tells him that Dracula and his wives take the form of wolves and bats at night and feed on the blood of the living. And Renfield's response is, well, that's all superstition. So he tells the innkeeper he's not afraid and he has to go. Before he gets back on the carriage, the innkeeper's wife gives him a cross. What's interesting is in the carriage, there's a woman who is wearing round glasses.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's noted as having the first speaking role in a horror movie. A horror movie.
First woman to have a speaking role?
Yeah, first woman.
Interesting. Okay.
Her name is Carla Lemay, and her uncle was Carl Lemay, who owned Universal. And I meant to have it with me, but I actually wrote to her.
Mm.
She has since passed away, but she lived to be like 104 or something.
Wow.
And I have a note card and her like mentioning the movie, which is cool.
That is cool.
The first time we see Dracula, I think it's pretty frightening. We see one of his wives coming out of a coffin, and then Dracula, where the camera zooms in slow motion, and he stands there, and his brides are walking up behind him. I thought that was kind of haunting. So the carriage pulls up, and it's pretty funny because the driver just throws his luggage off. Yep. He just tosses it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see Dracula, which I don't know at the time if people knew it was Dracula, driving the coach.
Right.
He's got something around his head. Renfield doesn't realize it's him. And then at one point in the trip, Dracula turns into a bat. Renfield's, I think, leaning out of the window, and he sees a bat, and the horses are just going by themselves. And then he gets out of the carriage, and the driver, of course, is gone. That little trivia is the spider webs used in the castle were made by shooting rubber cement out of a rotary gun.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like something like a drill, something that spun around.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So Renfield meets Dracula. This is when Bela Lugosi says, I think his most famous quote, after hearing some wolves howl in the distance. He's like, listen to, I don't know if I can, listen to them, children of the night, what music they make. Something like that. And Renfield keeps worrying about what happened to his luggage and his papers. And I think up until this point, we have no idea why Renfield is meeting with Dracula.
Right.
Earlier, he tells the villagers that it's a matter of business. He's offered something to eat and mentions his papers. I think Dracula mentions that Renfield has, up until this point, kept it secret why he's meeting him. But now we find that Dracula wants to lease a place called Carfax Abbey in England, and he has chartered a ship for the following evening. We had a couple scenes. Renfield cuts his finger, and Dracula is drawn to it from the other side of the room. Some strange reason, there's a bed in the dining area. Renfield's cross drops down from his neck as Dracula is about to, I think, bite him.
Mm-hmm.
And Dracula pulls his cape up and turns, which is now like a classic Dracula move. And I mentioned before, I like when they show the isolated shots of Dracula, him staring with the shadows around him, at the camera. So Dracula pours Renfield a goblet of wine. He asks Dracula if he's drinking.
Aren't you drinking?
I never drink. Why?
So Dracula leaves Renfield for the night. Or does he? Renfield starts to feel kind of stuffy and goes over to open one of the floor-length windows. He opens it, sees a bat, and faints, only to have Dracula's creepy wives approach his passed-out body. And he shoos them away, Dracula does, and crouches down and appears to go for his neck. Now next we see a ship being tossed around the sea. Now the scenes for this were actually from a 1925 silent film called Soundbreaker.
Okay.
So that was pretty popular back then, is to use other scenes from other movies that fit in.
Makes sense.
So now at this point, Renfield has pretty much lost his mind. At first you think he's been turned into a vampire, but I think he can't handle what's going on, like the truth about Dracula, that he's, sucking blood, killing people.
Right.
And another great visual is Dracula when he's on the boat is when he's in the shadows and his eyes seem like they have a glow like around them. And then the ship drifts into Whitby Harbor after the storm, and it's discovered that everyone is dead except Renfield. And Renfield is admitted to a sanitarium. A little bit later, we see the words London, and Count Dracula is on the loose in foggy old London. We see him creep out in front of an innocent flower girl, and he sinks his teeth into her. You want to know the flower girl's real name?
Morticia.
This is my stupid, 12-year-old brain. Anita Harder. That's her name. So next we see Dracula. He's going to the theater to see the London Symphony Orchestra. As the usher girl goes to seat Dracula, he hypnotizes her so he can meet Dr. Seward, who is one of those luxury boxes. And with him are John, Mina, and her friend Lucy. So Lucy and Mina are back at their apartment and they're talking about Dracula before they go to bed. And it seems Lucy has a crush on the Count.
Oh, Lucy, you're so romantic.
Laugh all you like. I think he's fascinating.
But Lucy's just in luck since the Count is lurking outside the house near her gate. Soon there's a bat at the window, and next we see the Count next to her bed. Lucy has fallen asleep, and Dracula creeps in and goes to bite her neck. So Lucy is dead, and the doctors notice she had bite marks on her neck. Now it's in an operating room, and it reminded me of the Seinfeld episode where Jerry and Kramer...
With the junior mint?
Yeah, with the junior mint. I was waiting for that.
Yep.
Now we find out Renfield is being kept at Dr. Seward's sanitarium. And it so happens that the sanitarium is connected to Carfax Abbey, where Dracula is. But it's kind of strange, I think, that Renfield and Dracula ended up in the same place.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out why Renfield goes off for hours and why he's eating bugs. They actually bring up Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Van Helsing is one of the doctors. And after hearing a wolf howling in the distance, he brings out Wolfbane and shows it to Renfield, who gets angry and tells him he knows too much to live. So we kind of figure out at this point that Renfield is still being controlled by Dracula. He's lurking outside Renfield's window, and Renfield is pretty happy that Dracula is back, that they've been reunited. Dracula pays a visit to Mina as Renfield pleads with him from his window not to go to her. And the Count visits John and Mina. Van Helsing is there too and notices that they are standing by a mirror and Dracula is not throwing off a reflection. So Van Helsing confronts Dracula and opens a box with a mirror in it, and Dracula swats it away. He then explains that he does not like mirrors. But before leaving, he tells Van Helsing, he's complimenting Van Helsing that he is a wise man, because he's onto him.
Yeah.
So John goes out on the balcony, and he sees a wolf out on the lawn. So we figure out that Dracula is also able to change into a wolf. So Mina goes outside and Dracula's creeping by a tree and he lures her to him, spreading out his cape. A maid soon runs in screaming and they find Mina lying on the ground. But Mina seems okay the next day, but frazzled as she talks to Van Helsing. And that's what I couldn't figure out was if she wasn't a vampire. Like, what did he do?
What did he do?
Yeah. So at this point, we're not sure what Mina is. And it seems, because she has a conversation about a woman in white. And I think at that point, it's daytime. So it's not night. The comic relief is this character named Martin. He's one of the sanitarium workers. And he's in charge of watching Renfield, who keeps escaping. And he calls Renfield a loony. Dracula confronts Van Helsing, and Dracula tells him that he should return to the old country. Van Helsing is having none of this and tells Dracula he'll have his house torn down stone by stone and drive a stake through his heart. Now Dracula tries to control Van Helsing with his hypnotic powers. It looks like it's working at first, but Van Helsing fights it off. And as Dracula confronts him, Van Helsing draws out a cross and Dracula retreats.
That scene, that was one that I had marked down to kind of talk about. It didn't feel genuine to me.
Mm-hmm.
Dracula's there, and they're just talking like they're regular people. And then out of nowhere, he pulls out, because Dracula says something about, not having the stake and you're not going to be able to defeat me or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he pulls out the cry of something better and he pulls out the cross.
Yeah.
And then Dracula just runs away.
Yeah.
Like with his tail between his legs. And it was, I don't know.
Yeah, there was no big confrontation.
No.
Dracula's kind of a wimp. So the next scene we find out Mina won't go to bed as the nurse leaves her room, but for some reason Mina appears on the balcony. She's at her door and then I don't know. John is fascinated by how great Mina looks. He says it looks like she's changed. She gets an intense look on her face and appears she wants to bite his neck, but they sit and talk. A bat keeps flying around them, which we know is Dracula. Mina gets some crazy eyes as she's looking at John and she is probably about to bite him. But Van Helsing sees what's going on and brings out his cross, and Mina is in hysterics. And then she says something about Dracula. Martin appears with one of the maids, and he's got a rifle and starts shooting at the bat, but he misses. And then Renfield escapes again and is seen outside Carfax Abbey by John and Van Helsing. And Dracula has retrieved Mina from her bed and brings her to the Abbey. So Renfield confronts Dracula on the steps inside the Abbey, and Dracula throws him down the steps as John and Van Helsing enter the Abbey. Then they run after Dracula and Mina in what looks like it's an area below the Abbey.
It's like the catacombs or something.
Yeah. And then they find two coffins, one containing Dracula and the other is empty. I don't know. It seems like this film is, even though I like this film for the way it looks, it seems like it was kind of thrown together.
Yes.
Because you have Dracula on the steps, throwing Renfield down the steps, and then all of a sudden he's in the coffin.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm so glad you said that. The movie ended, and I went, wait, it's over?
Yeah.
What just happened?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just looked like there was action 2 minutes ago, and now all of a sudden they go to look in the coffin, and it's empty, and the end. Yeah. I was like, what? Did I miss something? I actually rewound it 10 minutes to make sure that I didn't somehow miss something or it skipped. And I was like, it's over.
Well, I even have here, the ending is abrupt.
Yeah.
Van Helsing makes a wooden stake out of one of the lids of the coffin.
You don't see him pound it through his chest or anything. You don't see any death to Dracula. It just... This one was low on my list because it didn't feel like... There was no good flow to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like the characters were developed very well. It was just a lot of very random dialogue to me. And it just... I think the intent was to, show Dracula's power and, the vampire, how they kind of get that hold of you and, get that internal life because of that. But I just didn't feel like I was kind of, I guess, brought into the plot enough. They didn't develop it enough for me. It felt thrown together.
I feel the same way. They never explain if Mina was a vampire, just hypnotized. She might have just been hypnotized.
Correct. I struggled with that one a lot. The Mummy and Dracula were the two that I really struggled with.
Okay, so we're going to go into the next one. And let's see.
Well, hold on. Before you do...
Isn't there one before that?
We're both down to our number one. But I know what your number one is. Do you remember what I've said at this point?
No.
Your number one is Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
My number one is The Invisible Man.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I was wondering where that one... And that's the one you were impressed with?
That was the one I was very impressed with.
Okay. Let's do Frankenstein first.
All right, because Frankenstein...
We'll go a little out of order.
Frankenstein was my number 3. I really
Number 4 was Invisible Man for me.
Yeah, I really liked Frankenstein. That was my number 3.
And like I was telling Jeremy earlier, my thing is that Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman are movies that I watch every year. I watch the, the sequels. And the other ones I'm not too familiar with, so that's probably why. And they didn't really, it wasn't movies that would blow you away. So, and I couldn't really put those 3 that I have at the top down a peg or anything. Okay, so we're on to Frankenstein.
This was one of the ones I had a very difficult time placing because I enjoyed it a lot. So it's at 3, but it's like 1C. You know, Frankenstein.
Frankenstein is just my absolute favorite, like Universal, of course. I have it at number 1. It was great. I got to tell Sara Karloff that it was my first horror movie. She doesn't like to call them horror movies. Terror. When I was about 4 years old, when my dad was watching it in his recliner, and when I saw Frankenstein, I was hiding behind the recliner. Now, not to put down my dad or anything, but the type of person my dad was, I doubt he turned it off. Like some parents would. So I doubt my dad would have turned the movie off. I'm watching this.
Right.
I mean, maybe my mom came in and got me, but I remember being frightened. And that's like my first memory, basically. One of my first memories of being that young. So this film premiered November 21st, 1931. It's got an 8.8 out of 10 rating with an 80% audience score. So it scores decently. I think higher than the other ones. The budget was $262,007. Movie brought in $1 million on its first run, and it's 70 minutes long.
This one felt just right.
We have Colin Clive as Frankenstein, Henry Frankenstein. Mae Clark as Elizabeth Lavenza, Henry's fiance, and John Bowles as Victor Moritz, Henry's friend. I was confused because I thought there was a Victor Frankenstein, and in the original novel, his name is Victor. So that's what confused me. Okay. I thought it was his brother, but it's his friend. Now, I have someone posted the other night, there was a Jeopardy question, and you don't see too many trick questions on Jeopardy. But I have to tell you, this is a trick question. Here it is. Of Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney, or Colin Clive, the one who played the title role in the 1931 film Frankenstein.
Colin Clive?
Yes. And it's a trick question because most people over time call the monster Frankenstein. And it's actually Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
So
Frankenstein's
and what I heard was nobody got the question right. Or whoever... Yeah, nobody got they thought it was Boris Karloff.
Right.
Okay, so we have, let's see, of course, Boris Karloff. He was billed as the monster, but positive that there's a question mark, as, it didn't say Boris Karloff in the opening credits. Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Waldman. Now, he was also in Dracula and The Mummy. And Frederick Kerr as Baron Frankenstein, who likes to drink, and we'll find out about that.
Yep.
Dwight Fry as Fritz, Henry's assistant. And we talked about Dwight Fry and a couple other people. But
I don't know what he did in the movie to have that hunchback look, but man, that was great.
Yeah.
He did a nice job. either hunching over or whatever they did to help him out. I mean, there's some scenes where he's going to open the door and stuff, and he is way, his head is down by his knees.
Yeah. I want to watch some other movies with him because he was pretty intense. I can see him being in other, even dramas or something, pretty intense actor, playing, Renfield and then Fritz. Yeah, playing Fritz. I've seen Young Frankenstein so many times, I want to call him Igor, So in 1930, as a result of the success of the film Dracula, the head production, Carl Laemmle, we'll hear his name a lot, announced immediate plans for more horror films. So it purchased the rights to John L. Balderstone's planned stage adaptation of Peggy Webling's British stage adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel. Immediately following his success in Dracula, Lugosi had hoped to play Henry Frankenstein in the original film concept. However, the actor was expected by producer Carl Laemmle to play the monster, a common move for a contract player in a film studio at the time. I guess was to play a monster, I don't know. And although this is regarded as one of the worst decisions in any actor's career, in actuality, the part that Lugosi was offered was not the same character that Karloff eventually played. The initial director was Robert Florey, who had recharacterized the monster as a simple killing machine, without a touch of human interest or pathos, unlike the original Shelley novel. And this reportedly caused Lugosi to complain, "I was a star in my country, and I will not be a scarecrow over here." Oh, that was good. Thank you. Where's the applause? Florey later wrote that the Hungarian actor didn't show himself very enthusiastic for the role and didn't want to play it. So Kenneth Strickfaden, I always get these names, like what is going on?
Yeah.
There's not like John Smith.
No.
He designed the electrical effects that were used in the creation scene. They were so successful that such effects came to be considered an essential part of every subsequent Universal film involving Frankenstein's monster. Accordingly, the equipment used to produce them has come to be referred to in fan circles as Strickfadens. It appears that Strickfaden managed to secure the use of at least one Tesla coil built by the inventor Nikola Tesla himself.
Wow, pretty cool.
The film opened in New York City at the Mayfair Theater on December 4th, 1931, and it grossed $53,000 in 1 week. One of our Halloween podcasts, I think it was like 2 years ago, I did talk about Frankenstein a little bit. And there is a controversial scene in the movie at the time. And it's a scene where the monster, see, I almost said Frankenstein. The monster throws Maria, the little girl, into the lake and she drowns. Upon its original 1931 release, the second part of this scene, which is when he's throwing her in the lake, was cut by state censorship boards in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Interesting.
Those states also objected to a line they considered blasphemous that occurred during Frankenstein's exuberance when he first learns that his creature is alive. And it was, Victor says, "Henry, in the name of God." And Henry says, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God."
Yeah.
So they had a problem with that.
Yeah.
And Kansas requested the cutting of 32 scenes.
Wow.
So I guess the movie, they said the movie would have been cut in half. It would have been like 30 minutes or something.
Nice.
So eventually they did do an edited version, but not that much editing. This was known as a pre-code film, and I think it's like, you know, when the films weren't rated.
Right.
But I think they still did, obviously, maybe it was up to the states or the theaters. If they felt something was offensive, they cut things, cut scenes.
Interesting.
Now, it says Universal made cuts from the original camera negative, and sadly, most of the excised footage is lost. But however, the scene of the girl being thrown into the lake, believe it or not, was rediscovered during the early 1980s. And it was in the collection of the British National Film Archive. Otherwise, we would have never seen that scene. In the Irish Free State, it says, I don't know what that is. The film was banned on February 5th, 1932, for being demoralizing and unsuitable for children or, and I love this, nervous people.
Yeah, okay. Nervous people.
The film was banned in China due to falling under the category of superstitious films as a result of its strangeness and unscientific elements. Probably still banned there. So the makeup, after casting Boris Karloff as the monster, director James Whale sketched some initial designs that exaggerated Karloff's facial features, and Whale showed the sketches to Jack Pierce, we've mentioned him before, to use as a starting point for the makeup. So Whale and Pierce agreed they didn't want a design to overshadow Karloff's natural features and needed the monster to retain a pitiful humanity. So every morning at 3:30 in the morning, Karloff would arrive in the makeup chair and the process would begin. And since this was before the advent of foam latex, no individual makeup pieces were produced. He had to recreate, get this. What the hell is that?
There's 3 bugs up there. I don't know.
They must be coming in the wind though.
I don't know what they are, but
they're probably beetles.
Those two are about to make out with each other, it looks like.
We've got bugs in here.
This is like that Creep Show episode. That's how it started. Just a couple of bugs.
We need Renfield in here now because we just noticed there's bugs. We have the window open.
Oh, he went around.
So we need Renfield in here. Unless Jeremy eats bugs.
Well, I don't know if you noticed when we were interviewing Sarah, there was something buzzing by the microphone.
I thought that was a drone.
No.
Outside.
No.
Oh, okay.
There was like a bee or something. It was buzzing right into the microphone.
So because this was before foam latex, right?
Right.
You know, now they produce individual pieces that they can apply like over and over, right?
Right.
So Jack Pierce had to recreate the makeup every single morning from scratch. And removing the makeup took between 1 and 2 hours to completely peel off. And this involved breaking it down with various oils and acids, then literally prying the makeup off of Karloff's face. We asked Sarah about this.
It did not scar his face.
Yeah. So Wikipedia is wrong on him having scars. Now it says Karloff sometimes slept with the makeup on in order to reduce the workload for each morning and to give his face a rest. He braced his head between 2 books so he wouldn't roll around during the night and damage it.
Wow.
That's what they said.
That's pretty cool.
And then Pierce would later touch it up. This film is recognized by the American Film Institute. It was named the 87th greatest movie of all time on 100 Years, 100 Movies. And the line, "It's alive, it's alive," was ranked as the 49th greatest movie quote in American cinema. And the film was ranked number 56 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills, a list of America's most heart-pounding. Okay, so we're going to talk about Frankenstein, the actual movie now.
Frankenstein.
So this starts out a little strange. A guy comes out behind a curtain to introduce the movie to theater goers. "How do you do, Mr. Carl it's Lemley." I was saying it wrong the whole time. Because that's where I first heard it.
Yeah.
That feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the 2 great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It may even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, we warned you. And people ran out of the theater.
As fast as they could. The fire exits couldn't even hold them all.
So the first scene is a funeral, and we see 2 people lurking about as the gravedigger fills in the grave. And one of the guys lurking looks familiar, and he should because he's played by Renfield in Dracula. This movie came out before Dracula, but in Dracula at least, we got to see him act a little normal in the beginning.
Right.
So this character is Fritz. When the gravedigger is done, the 2 guys come out from behind a wrought iron fence with shovels. One is Fritz and the other is Henry Frankenstein. They start digging up the grave. Now there's some scary ass statue next to the grave.
Yes, there is.
I mean, it's huge. It's probably 10 feet tall. It looks like the Grim Reaper leaning on a sword or something.
Yep.
Now they take the wooden casket and they're pulling it on some wagon. The area that they're in looks kind of like what they used in Dracula. It has that same kind of desolate look to it.
Yep.
Now they come upon a body hanging from a post, and Fritz climbs up to cut it down. The body hits the ground, and then Henry says that they can't use it because the neck is broken. I think Fritz says, "What about the guy in the box?" Now they don't even look. I don't even think they look at the guy. I don't know how you can tell if a brain's good or not. And then says, "We must find another brain." So next we're at Goldstadt Medical College, and we see a doctor giving a presentation about the human brain. One is normal, and one is someone named Abby. Abby Normal. No, that wrong movie. Sorry. Well, it's abnormal. I think it actually says abnormal. That's probably where they got it from.
Yeah.
So after the place clears out, Fritz breaks in and steals the brain. Before he takes the brain, he picks up the normal brain, and he thinks he hears someone and drops it on the floor. And he grabs the abnormal brain.
Yep.
So the next scene, we first see Henry's friend, Victor, and Henry's fiancée, Elizabeth. And Victor, I think, is trying to horn in on Elizabeth.
Yep.
They're worried about Henry and his experiments. And the last time Victor saw Henry was 3 weeks ago. So they go off to visit Victor's old professor, Dr. Waldman. And it's with a W, but that's how they say it, Waldman. And he tells him about Henry wanting to create life. So Elizabeth and Victor insist on visiting Henry at his laboratory. Dr. Waldman says they would not be very welcome. He at first doesn't want to go with them, but then he agrees. Just like Elizabeth all of a sudden wants to go with Victor after saying she was gone to bed. So the next scene, we see Henry and Fritz in the laboratory, and we get our first glimpse at Frankenstein here. The monster, his arm, and his head, which is bandaged up. So Elizabeth, Victor, and Waldman are soon heard knocking, and Fritz goes down and tells them to go away. But a big storm is brewing outside. And after pleading and pleading, especially after Henry realizes Elizabeth is there, he lets them all in. But he still doesn't want them in the laboratory. That is until Victor calls Henry crazy, and to prove that he isn't crazy, he all wants them to witness the experiment.
Which is hilarious to me. Let me prove to you I'm not crazy by bringing this monster to life.
Yeah, these dead parts back to life.
That he built with his hands. He emphasized that many times. The body he built with his hand.
The brain you stole, Fritz. Think of it. The brain of a dead man, waiting to live again in a body I made with my own hands. With my own hands.
So they all go upstairs into the laboratory. He tells them to sit, and then he goes into how he first did experiments on animals and a heart.
Well, the doctor is nosy and is actually looking at the monster.
He's trying to...
And he's like, goes over and yells at him to sit down or whatever.
And he explains to Dr. Waldman that he put together body parts for this experiment. And he starts the experiment, and the monster is lifted up on a pretty haphazard table up to the ceiling. There's a lot of thunder and buzzing noises and sparks. But one thing I noticed is that nothing really is hooked up to the monster.
No.
Because later on we notice he has bolts.
Right.
Which would be good to, like jumper cables or something.
Mm-hmm.
After they bring the monster down, the monster's hand moves, and Henry starts yelling, "It's alive." And next scene we see Victor, Elizabeth, and Victor and Henry's father, Baron.
This scene is just funny to me, too.
So he's upset because he hasn't seen Henry in a while. And no one knows what's going on with him.
He accuses his son of cheating on Elizabeth.
There is another woman, and I'm going to find her.
He's like convinced that he's having multiple affairs, and that's why he hasn't seen him forever. And it's like, okay, why did you go to that theory? Like, what made you think that?
Too much booze, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the Burgermeister shows up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to call him. Isn't it? What's his name? He is something Meister. And he wants to know when the wedding is going to take place. And the whole town seems to be ready for the wedding. It's a small town. But somehow no one has informed Elizabeth and Henry, I guess. We need to get this wedding going.
Mm-hmm.
And next we see Dr. Waldman and Henry. Henry tells him the brain he used was from Dr. Waldman's own laboratory, and the doctor doesn't seem too upset about it.
Isn't it the brain of a criminal, though, or something?
Yeah, he tells him it was a criminal brain, but he doesn't want it back.
Yeah.
Not that one. But he doesn't say anything about the smashed other brain.
Right.
I mean, the brain's dead, but, you know.
Yeah.
And he says only evil can come of it. So next, I think it's Dr. Waldman and Henry, aren't they? They're in a room. This is when the monster comes up.
I was going to say, this and they're fighting for their life, in a sense.
Yeah. So the monster has somehow walked up a flight of steps backwards because when he opens the door, he's backwards and he turns around. But I think it's for the audience goer, you know.
Yeah.
Not to see his face right away. And I say here, yeah, I always wondered about the bolts coming out of his neck.
Well, I want to know what they injected him with, too, because the doctor has to kind of sneak up behind him and he sticks a needle in his neck, like a tranquilizer type of thing. But it doesn't work right away. And then finally, out of nowhere, the monster is choking Frankenstein, I think it is.
Yeah.
And he all of a sudden just falls over in a heap.
Henry has the monster sit down and he opens a skylight. I don't know, almost like a pet trick, because the monster puts his arms up, you know, looking at the sunlight. But then Fritz comes in and runs in with his torch, and we discover the monster doesn't like fire. And then they chain up the monster, and they start beating him with whips. And Fritz seems to love taunting him with his torch. Freaking monster abuse. This was outlawed in 1974. So next scene, Henry and Dr. Volkman rush down to the chamber Frankenstein is being held in after hearing Fritz screaming, and they find the monster has broken from his chains and Fritz is hanging, which is odd because, you know, Fritz was just screaming what the monster, like, I don't know if he was hanging from the chain. I don't know. That was weird.
Yeah.
So Dr. Volkman wants to kill the monster with an injection, and with his suggestion, Henry comes back with a needle and a torch. So Frankenstein fights Dr. Volkman after he injects him and tries to strangle Henry before he passes out. And the funniest is when Frankenstein is waving his hands, and then he makes this little whimper before falling down.
Yeah, he just crumbles.
So Victor shows up with Elizabeth and her father. They hide Frankenstein before they get there, before they get to the front door.
They don't chain him up or anything. They just stick him in a room.
Yeah. And then Henry passes out in front of Baron and Elizabeth. So Henry is sick, but we don't know what it is, but I'm thinking it's just exhaustion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Henry goes to stay with his dad and Elizabeth while Dr. Volkman is in charge of the monster. And then Frankenstein ends up killing Dr. Volkman when he goes to cut into him.
Yeah, he strangles him from behind, though. Did you notice that?
Oh.
His arm, like, comes alive, and then, like, he's got, like, the back of his neck. It was really weird.
And we don't know what Dr. Volkman was trying to do, or thought maybe he was dead.
Right.
I don't know why he's cutting into him.
Yeah.
And then Henry finally asked Elizabeth when they're getting married. And all the townspeople's heads explode at this great news. And they end up burning down the village. No. They're so happy.
Yeah.
Okay, I made that up. It's now Henry and Elizabeth's wedding day. Baron keeps getting everyone to toast the House of Frankenstein over and over. Keep getting sloshed.
Now, how about a little drink, eh? Come on. Here's a health to a son of the House of Frankenstein.
A son to the House of Frankenstein.
So Frankenstein, in the meantime, makes his way to a house outside the village where we see a father and daughter. And this is the scene we talked about. And the father mentions that they'll be going to the village soon to celebrate. And the father leaves his daughter so he can finish up some work. And she goes over to the lake that's right near the house. She encounters Frankenstein. And she's picking flowers.
Yeah, looks like daisies.
And they're throwing them into the water. And Frankenstein is also doing that. And then he picks her up and throws her into the water. Now, somehow the girl never learned how to swim. And why she didn't venture off into the lake and drown before this. Because I know when you have a small child and you're looking for a house, I mean, maybe he inherited the house, but you might not want to be near water, especially if there's not a fence or anything.
Right.
I'm just a responsible parent. I don't know.
Maybe. And then, if memory serves correct, we go into the crazy scene where you just see dancing. Like it's like a German beer fest type of just people dancing around.
Yeah.
Like it's just music and...
It's like turns into a musical.
Yeah, for like 3 minutes it felt like an eternity again. I'm like, what is going on? Why am I just watching this random dancing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid. Terribly afraid.
So Elizabeth is eventually worried that Dr. Volkman has not arrived yet, and they soon find out he's been murdered. And Henry locks Elizabeth in the room. Victor is telling the guests that the monster has been seen in the hills terrorizing the mountainside. And all of a sudden you hear a moaning sound.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's not your stomach.
And after the moan, Victor exclaims that the monster is upstairs.
Yeah.
So he automatically knows he's upstairs in the house.
Yeah.
And how did he just walk in the house with all the people and go upstairs?
I was wondering the same thing.
And they start searching the house.
And they look in the most ridiculous places. They literally like pull the table back and they're like, oh, nope, he's not back there.
Yeah. He's not hiding back there. So the monster climbs through a window of the room Elizabeth is in and attacks her. But she, I guess, is apparently okay.
She screams, but she's just laying there. I don't know what happened.
And then we see the man whose daughter drowned. He carries her through the town and goes directly to the Burgermeister. And he tells him that she's been murdered. And I guess somehow they know it's the monster. I don't know.
Yeah, that was... I think he said something like, why did you bring her here? Or something like that. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Go bury
her.
Henry leaves Elizabeth in Victor's care, and Victor does not object to this. The Burgermeister organizes search parties to track down the monster. This is the thing. All the men in the gang are going through the village with their torches, passing all the houses. Now, he's just been seen at a house. All of a sudden, he's in the hills again, I guess they know.
Yeah, he ends up in a windmill, right?
Well, they don't search one single house.
No.
You know, they're just running through the town to get to the woods and the hills. This is a great scene, though, with the torches, everybody gathering up and leaving the women behind, I noticed. They were not allowed to come along. And again, we won't go into the ending, but somehow Henry... I'm not even going to say what happened, but he survives a fall onto a windmill blade. And I don't know how many feet he drops.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
But he amazingly survives.
And I don't know if that was a stunt or if that was like a real thing that they did. But that seemed like a pretty big drop. Mm-hmm.
So the Baron is still drinking.
How about a little drink, eh?
And he's still toasting to the House of Frankenstein. What happened to the monster? Did Henry fully recover, or did his friend Victor horn in on Elizabeth? Or did Elizabeth end up marrying the monster? You'll have to find out.
The world may never know.
So that's one of my utmost favorite monster movies is Frankenstein. I could watch that again and again, especially in the sequel, which maybe we'll talk about next year, Bride of Frankenstein.
I have not seen that.
That's a great one.
Yeah, no, Frankenstein was really good. The dancing in the middle is the one thing that was like, what am I watching here? But otherwise, from start to finish, it was a really good movie. I loved, like, I don't know if there was real rain or if they had some kind of effect to make the rain, but it was pouring. So whatever they did, that was really cool for that scene. You touched on the electrical, bringing Frankenstein to life.
Yeah.
Being such a memorable moment, but you can't talk about that enough. It was really cool to watch. Even in black and white, it definitely got its point across. So that was really exciting. And then, the only thing, I didn't think much of it with the little girl, but it didn't feel like that was needed in a sense. But, otherwise, great movie. And then there was one.
Yes, The Invisible Man.
I have a new favorite Universal monster after doing this little... Nice. This little watch along. I was blown away by this movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know we'll get into it. But
yeah, the effects are great.
The effects are great. the whole concept is great. And I love how they did the Invisible Man in a sense.
Yeah.
They dress him up so that you can see him. But then even when you can't see him, you got the footprints or something to make sure that you know where he's at.
Yeah.
And that was just so cool.
So this was released actually on Halloween, 1933.
Nice.
Because I think most of these films were released in December for some reason. And it's 70 minutes long. Budget was $328,000. Has a 7.9 out of 10. 78 audience score, Rotten Tomatoes. Cast is Gloria Stewart, who was Flora, and she was in Titanic.
Like I say, she was
the
pretty.
Old woman in Titanic.
Yeah.
Claude Rains is Dr. Jack Griffin, who is, of course, we find out the Invisible Man. Spoiler alert. William Harrington as Dr. Arthur Kemp. Henry Travers as Dr. Cranley. Una O'Connor, who is incredible just as Jenny. So she was also in Frankenstein. And she is just the part of the movie that makes, just her yelling and screaming. And she is one of the owners of the inn. Let's see.
Which is funny because I didn't even know that was an inn at first. You see the Invisible Man come in, and it looks like it's an old school saloon or something.
Yeah, bar. Yeah. But then there's apartments.
Yeah, and he's like, I need a room. And they're like, we don't rent them out. And he's like, I need a room.
We ain't got none ready, not at this time of year.
And then they can't get rid of him.
And believe it or not, we also have Dwight Fry. He's a reporter.
Nice.
So he has, a small role in the movie.
Yep.
Following the success of Dracula, Richard L. Shayer and Robert Florey suggested to Universal Pictures as early as 1931 that an adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man would make a suitable follow-up. And both Carl Laemmle and Carl Laemmle Jr. opted to make a film adaptation of Frankenstein instead. So while Frankenstein was shooting, Universal bought the rights to The Invisible Man from Wells on September 22nd, 1931 for $10,000, and he demanded script approval from Universal.
Wow.
So principal photography of The Invisible Man began at the end of June 1933 and concluded in late August. All of the special effects shots were filmed in what Gloria Stewart recalled as in utmost secrecy during production. The special effects work took another 2 months to complete, and Universal press clips falsely claim that the invisibility effects were optical effects done with mirrors, which they weren't. James Whale worked closely with John P. Fulton on the film's special effects. Fulton revealed how the effects were done in September 1934 issue of American Cinematographer, stating they had been shot against a completely black set with walls and floors covered in black velvet to make it non-reflective. The actor was then covered head to foot with black velvet tights and wore whatever clothes he required for the scene. With this negative, a print was made, and a duplicate negative was made to serve as mats for printing. Then with an ordinary printer, they made a composite first printing of the positive of the background and normal action using the negative mat to mask the area where the Invisible Man was to move. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yep.
So Fulton said the principal difficulty of this was matching the lighting on the visible close shot with the general lighting used in the scenes and fixing small imperfections, such as scenes with eye holes, which were touched up in the film frame by frame with a brush and opaque dye.
Wow. So a lot of editing work, it sounds like.
Yeah. For other scenes where Rains is unwrapping the bandage from his head, for the villagers, Rains' own head is hidden below his collar. And the bandages are being taken off a thin wire frame.
That's cool. That was really cool. When you want to see? He starts unwrapping himself, and it's like,
And then one effect you mentioned about the snow, is when he's walking through the snow.
Yep.
So how did they do that? The footprints were created through a system of footprint-shaped platforms held in place with pegs underneath a layer of rock salt which emulated snow. As the pegs were pulled, the platform would drop, creating a footprint.
Interesting. Okay.
The crew pulled the pegs in sequence, which on film gave the appearance of Griffin walking.
Right.
So the music is Heinz Rohmheld composed the score. He would later score Dracula's Daughter, The Black Cat, and he won an Academy Award for Yankee Doodle Dandy. Now, the film score is only heard in the opening during the last 7 minutes of the film and while the closing credits run. The music is also heard again in Werewolf of London, The Black Cat, and 2 serial films, Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers, 1939 now. So we're going to go into the film itself, and this is our last segment. It starts, an invisible man walks into a bar. Well, actually, that's how the movie begins, but it's an inn.
Right. You don't know he's invisible, though, when he walks in, because he's fully clothed.
Yeah.
They give you the impression he looks rough, because the guy behind the bar is, like, freaked out by him, or, you know, a little scared or tentative. And he calls his wife, who's also freaked out by him. So, I don't know. The portrayal is that he looks rough.
And I don't know at the time if people realized right away that that was going to be the Invisible Man. I mean, he's wrapped up kind of weirdly.
Right. Because it's super cold outside.
Yeah.
He's bundled up in, big jacket and stuff.
Yeah. So the inn is the Lion's Head Inn, and it's in the English village of Ipping in Sussex, to be exact.
It reminded me of An American Werewolf in London, that pub that they go to. I don't know, just the sign looked similar, and that's what it reminded me of.
Now, for some reason, they don't like people staying over, I guess, this time of year, which you would think would be the opposite.
Right.
Because if you're inside drinking for hours, you don't want to trudge out into the snow.
Yeah.
So the inn owner, Jenny, she goes up to bring the Invisible Man some mustard, she forgot, after he checks in. And she walks in on him eating, and he has no mouth. So she goes back down into the bar area, and she tells them about the bandages and surmises that he's been in a horrible accident. One patron says that he bumped his head on the prison wall getting over it. So the next scene, we see a woman, Flora, who is played by Gloria Stewart, along with her father, who seems to be some kind of scientist, chemist. Now, Flora's worried about Jack since he's run off. At this point, we can figure out that Dr. Jack Griffin is the Invisible Man. So Jenny goes up to Jack's room and tries to bring him lunch, but something's blocking the door, and she bursts in, knocking over something, and Jack has basically set up a science lab in his room with his tubes and beakers. Jenny is furious and wants him out, and if he doesn't leave, she's calling the cops. So Jenny's husband, Herbert, has a talk with Jack, and Jack pleads with him to let him stay and tells him he's had a serious accident. And pretty soon he's beating up Herbert. The cops show up to arrest him, and Jack gets pissed since he just wanted a room to work in for the antidote.
Right. He's trying to figure out how to fix his problem.
And he starts unraveling his bandages, revealing that he is invisible. There is a lot of humor in this movie, which is great.
Yeah.
Because when he's unraveling, I think it's Constable Jaffers. I think he has some of the best lines. He says,
"Look, he's all eaten away."
They run back down the stairs, but come back up, and Jack's only wearing a shirt.
Yeah, once they get downstairs, they kind of come to the realization of, we can't let him strip down naked or we won't be able to see him.
Yeah. And Jaffers says that, as one of the bar patrons says, put the handcuffs on, and Jaffers' response is,
"How can I handcuff a blooming shirt?"
Yep.
So the Invisible Man escapes. The whole town now knows there's an Invisible Man on the loose.
That part was funny to me. The town just understands that there's an invisible man loose. They don't question that. They don't, like, what are you talking about? An invisible man. They just, sure, there's an invisible man loose.
And I don't know if that's the scene where he's tipping over bikes and just playing around with people, hats and stuff, where he's running around doing different things.
If that was in the middle or here.
So Dr. Cranley and Dr. Kemp are in Jack Griffin's lab looking for clues, and Dr. Cranley finds a note that indicates Dr. Griffin was using monocaine. According to Dr. Cranley,
monocaine's a terrible drug.
So Dr. Kemp goes back to his house and hears a news report on the radio about an invisible man on the loose. Jack is actually in the room. He's sitting in the room. He starts talking to Kemp, and Kemp gets him some pajamas to wear, and he draws the blinds in his office downstairs because he doesn't want anybody knowing that the Invisible Man, like, they're going to see him anyway. But
right.
So Jack tells him how everything happened, and he wants Kemp to join him as his invisible partner, and mentions going on a murder spree.
Yeah.
He tells Kemp he needs to go retrieve his notebooks he left back at the inn. And Jack is in the car naked, basically. The Invisible Man. And it's cold out, so all the townspeople are giving confessions as to what they witnessed, what they saw or didn't see. This is pretty much at the bar.
Yep.
Jack and Kemp show up. Kemp is outside, and Jack is to go in and retrieve Jack's notebooks. He tells him to keep an eye on the window above him as he stands outside the building. Now, Inspector Byrd, who is questioning townspeople, declares that the whole thing is a hoax. He doesn't believe their stories, but just as he declares that, all hell breaks loose when Jack starts throwing stuff at everyone. Jenny starts screaming that the Invisible Man is there.
He's here! The Invisible Man!
And she's running out of there saying, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." Just run. I think she runs out of there. Jack chokes the inspector and hits him with a chair, somehow killing him.
Yeah.
And next we see Jack at Kemp's house, and he basically has Kemp in his command. He tells him what is expected of him and where he cannot go so that he's not detected. Wants him to even clean his fingernails. Apparently being invisible does have its downfalls.
Right.
Because if you get any dirt on you,
you can be seen.
Yeah. So because of the inspector's death, the chief of detective organizes a search party, and he expects to gather 10,000 men, which is most likely impossible because I looked up this town. Now, I know it's a movie. And in 1931, this town had 400 residents. So where are you getting 10,000 men? Especially men, not just people, right?
Yeah.
Kemp calls Dr. Cranley for help, then the police, and tells them that the Invisible Man is asleep in his house. Their reply is that they only have 5 men available. So see, they wanted 10,000. They're complaining that we only have 5 men. Dr. Cranley and Flora show up at the house, and Flora wants to help Jack. She says her father can help him, but Jack apparently doesn't want help, and he's pretty much loving the power he has now at being invisible. I mean, who wouldn't?
Right.
He says, this is an odd comment, that even the moon is frightened of him. He tells Flora to leave. The cops show up at the house. Jack tells Kemp he's going to kill him.
That's funny.
And specifically tomorrow night at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yeah.
I shall kill you even if you hide in the deepest cave of the earth. At 10 o'clock tomorrow night, I shall kill you.
Now Jack's outside and taunting the police. He swings one officer around and takes his pants. And we see a woman running down the road screaming and a pair of pants skipping after her. And this is weird because he's running around the countryside causing havoc. But I was pretty shocked by one scene where he made a train go off the tracks and went down a cliff.
Yeah.
He killed all those people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're going to stop with that. We're not going to tell you the ending. Do they capture him? Kill him? Does he get away? I don't know. So that's Jeremy's favorite.
That was my favorite.
I probably could have put that higher.
It was probably, I said about Dracula how I went into it with such high expectations and I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I think the reverse happened with this one. I had kind of no expectations because I haven't really heard about the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I was laughing and having fun and just so engaged in the film.
I've read some of H.G. Wells because he wrote War of the Worlds. Yeah. What else did he wrote? I think he wrote Time Machine or something like that. It was made into a movie.
Okay.
Yeah. He was definitely before his time with his thoughts. So we thank you for, if you listen to both podcasts, sitting through us talking about some monster movies. And we did talk some music, so.
Yeah, and if you're catching this on the Horror Con Lounge podcast, be sure to check out Know Good Music. That's KNOW, Good Music. I am on that show often. Rob and Mike?
Matt.
Rob and Matt. Rob and Matt are the...
We mostly do. Matt mostly does interviews.
Yeah, they're the two hosts if I'm not sitting in. Rob is the permanent... He's the brains of the operation.
I wouldn't.
He brings me in for the looks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so we're crossing over our episodes, or our podcast, which is great.
Yeah. So Kristen and I are going to do a little intro and a closure here, but kind of talking with her, she had no interest in doing the Universal Monsters at all. And, you know, for me, being a big horror fan, this is the start, I think.
Yeah.
When you think of horror, it starts with the Universal Monsters. You can't really go anywhere else. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe Nosferatu, but that's a silent picture, more of, I don't know, it's a little bit different.
But these as a complete...
The total package.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get, you know, how it began, some of the effects, some of the basics in film with sounds and dialogue and plot and storyline. And this is something I've always wanted to do. When Kristen said no, but Rob said yes, it was a perfect opportunity for us to cover 6 amazing films. Whether I liked them all or not, doesn't matter. They're still absolutely brilliant. And
it was at the beginning of the horror genre. The very beginning.
And they're always gonna hold up because that's where it began. So thank you for taking the time today to do this. And
thank you.
I had a lot of fun. And I'm excited. You know, you mentioned potentially looking at the sequels as a future episode. I think that would be a lot of fun. So, you know, I'm up for that challenge if you want to do it.
Yeah, and like I said, we like doing, for October, we like doing horror, but also mix in a little music stuff.
Yep. And be sure to check out the interview with Sara. She was great. She was fun to chat with and hear some of her stories. So,
yeah, we'll be meeting Sara at the Chiller Theater at the end of October. We'll get to say hi to her. Yeah, and if you're listening right now on No Good Music, you need to go over, listen to, not the same, you're not going to listen to the same podcast, but go check out HorrorCon Lounge, Jeremy's podcast. I don't know how many shows you guys have. You just got your year, up to your year anniversary.
We are approaching our 1-year anniversary. It'll have happened by the time this is published.
Yeah. So if you like horror movies, you need to listen to their podcast. So
yeah, we try and do a weekly, either reviews, interviews. We go to a lot of conventions, so some stories about that. But we try and find kind of the lesser known movies, or the movies that may be overlooked because of those big box office hits that are always talked about. We touch on those as well, but we love to find the hidden gems.
They kind of do what we do with the music podcast. Is we'll talk about the famous bands, but we'll also talk about bands you may never have heard of.
Right.
Same with horror movies.
Yep.
Yeah. Talk about the famous ones and then the not so famous. And I have checked out a lot of movies that they've recommended that some I have never heard of. Turned out to be pretty good movies. So
yeah.
We're about to leave you guys. So thanks for listening again. And remember to turn off that TV.
And turn up the music.
And you'll hear us again soon. You've been listening to No Good Music, intro and exit music by the band 99%. Today's show is produced and edited by Rob J. Lilly and recorded at the Did You Say 7 Studios in Washington, New Jersey. You can find No Good Music on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Pandora, and almost anywhere you listen to podcasts.